Well. Happy Canada Day to my friends and family in Canada. My name is Henry Sully, proud Canadian, but also Ugandan at heart, born and raised. I will always be African. For those of you who do not already know my name, as I said earlier, I am Henry Sully, and today I'm going to be talking about the events that are transpiring in Uganda's political landscape. Specifically, I want to interrogate how Uganda can still choose institutions over family rule. And I'm going to talk about three different items or topics, if you want. I'm going to talk about the Lilliputian politics. I've written about this before. Also, Professor Lule has written about this as well. I am also going to talk about sovereignty as well as the struggle for the republic. Now, for most of you, these might not seem as important conversations, and I see the excitement that is surrounding some of the events that are transpiring in Uganda right now. But I want us to think about some of these items differently, specifically because it is important for us to not just jubilate when there's something that happens on the political landscape in our countries, especially African countries. So I guess let us delve into this conversation tonight in Uganda, or today in Canada, but specifically tonight in Uganda. The country and the people find themselves in a very important situation. Uganda is at a crossroads. We know that President Museveni has assented to the protection of for sovereignty bill, transforming it into law, which means that it is now an act. It is no longer a bill to be discussed. It is an act to be implemented by policy implementers. So it's now up to the people on the grassroots. Some that I call street level bureaucrats, to implement what has been built within the sovereignty, the protection of sovereignty bill. So that is one item that happened today. But there's also another important item that happened. We know that in a major political development, Anita Among has withdrawn from the race for speakership of the 12th Parliament, of course, following months of intense scrutiny, sanctions, public criticism, and the growing institutional pressure around corruption allegations, which are linked to her leadership as Speaker of the 11th Parliament. Of course, we all know how Anita became Speaker of the 11th Parliament. We know that she started as a Deputy Speaker, but ultimately turned into the Speaker after the unfortunate and untimely death of the former Speaker, the Honorable Jacob Olanya. Now, many Ugandans are celebrating these two events differently. To some, the new sovereignty law is seen as a victory for state control and national protection. For others, they see Anita Among, honorable or dishonorable, they see her withdrawal as accountability finally catching up with political power. But tonight I want us to slow down. And I think my colleague Semakade has intimated on this on the X, calling on all the rebels to slow down on the celebrations, which I think is important for us to do. We need to slow down. And this is why we need to slow down. We need to slow down because the deeper question is not who won politically over the last couple of weeks and throughout this weekend. I think the deeper question is what kind of country is Uganda becoming? And perhaps more importantly, what we can question is, can Uganda use this moment to strengthen institutions, or will the country continue drifting towards personalized and family-centered role? And these are important questions because our country needs you and I to interrogate some of the events that transpire on a daily basis. And the only way we can do that is to be more keen on how things transpire in our country, how they are unpacked, and how they are explained to the foot soldiers or the common people, the common man who may not have access to some of the information that we do. Because this moment is bigger than one speaker. It is bigger than one law. It is also bigger than one election. I think this moment is about whether Uganda still believes in the republic itself. Okay? Now, let us begin with something uncomfortable. Uganda's biggest crisis is no longer simply corruption. It is the gradual shrinking of institutions around personalities. It is what I call the Lilliputian politics. Now, some of you might be asking yourselves, what does it mean? What is Lilliputian politics? The term comes from Gulliver's Travels, where Gulliver arrived in a country called Lilliput, a land ruled by tiny people obsessed with rank, punishment, ceremony, loyalty, and mere mature power struggles. They controlled everything, but despite all that control, they remained politically small. That increasingly feels like Uganda today. It's a giant nation. It's a giant nation trapped inside small politics. Politics where institutions matter less than individuals. Loyalty matters more than competence, and proximity to power matters more than politics or public service itself. Mu Luganda tulina olugero olugamba nti awali omukka tewabula muliro. What that really means is that you can tell that there is fire by seeing the smoke. When you see smoke, you know there must have been fire somewhere. Awali omukka tewabula muliro. And Ugandans today are seeing smoke everywhere through unexplained wealth, through institutional decline, through shrinking accountability, military influence over civilian life. And of course, public offices increasingly behaving like private territory. Now, here is the part that nobody wants to talk about. The recent withdrawal of Honorable Anita Among from the speakership race, it matters politically. It signals that public pressure, international scrutiny, and international credibility still matters. And that is important. But Ugandans must be very careful not to mistake one political retreat for systematic reform. Because Anita Among is not the entire story. She just became the face of a deeper problem. She is just a symptom. Because the deeper problem is that she presided over parliament increasingly perceived as detached from ordinary citizens and increasingly comfortable with entitlement, patronage, and excess. But the danger is now goat-scaping, what I call gate-scoping. Because I think Anita is a very small fish. So just like Nandutu was during the Iron Sheet saga. So sacrificing one visible politician does not break down the architecture behind the corruption. And Uganda has become very skilled at this. One scandal erupts, one official falls, public anger cools down, and the network survives. The network that builds these people, the individuals that we see that are corrupt, they don't just emerge randomly, they are built by a system. And that's why Ugandans must think structurally, not emotionally. I'm seeing the many celebrations, and I'm asking myself, are Ugandans thinking about the system that built Anita Among? Because corruption in Uganda is rarely isolated. It is protected through relationships, patronage, political usefulness, and proximity to power. And let me justify this by giving you a few examples. Think about the honorable or dishonorable Jim Muhwezi. This is a guy who was once censored by parliament during the corruption controversies linked to the Global Fund. Remember the Global Fund period. Guy was censored, thrown out of parliament, but later rehabilitated and bounced back into government. He's one of the president's close allies, or closest actually, allies. He's back into cabinet comfortably. And that's just one example. There's another example of the honorable or dishonorable Sam Kutesa. For years, allegations of public speculation around immense wealth accumulation. It's, this guy is regarded as one of the richest Ugandans or wealthiest, yet he continues to survive politically. And why? Because corruption in Uganda is sometimes, if not often, managed politically rather than confronted institutionally. And that distinction changes everything. Now, let us turn to the Protection of Sovereignty Act, because it's no longer a bill anymore, it's now an act. The law has now been assented to by President Yoweri Museveni. Of course, supporters say it protects Uganda from foreign interference and it strengthens national sovereignty. But critics still fear that something deeper is happening, that the law may centralize power and further shrink democratic participation. And this concern becomes more serious when viewed alongside recent political symbolism. For many of you who were able to follow the recent swearing in of the president, you know that one of the most striking images from the recent ceremony, swearing in ceremony at Kololo, was seeing the CDF, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, the president's son and the head of military, centrally involved in the ceremonial transfer and protection of presidential authority back to his father. Think about that. And let's not forget for a moment, let us forget the legality of that image. And let us think symbolically. Because politics is all about imagery. And to many Ugandans, that image communicated something profound. The military, the presidency, the family increasingly appearing as one continuous structure. Think about it. When you look at the military, you see the people in charge. When you look at the presidency, we know who is in charge. And look at how the family is intertwined, is within different structures of Ugandan institutions. Now, this becomes even more concerning when military figures being publicly, when we see the CDF behind the PLU directing and commenting on how parliament should operate, this is a new, I don't know if I should call it a new law or a new high. Wherever you are standing, you can choose what you want to call it. But that is dangerous territory for Uganda. Because parliament is supposed to represent citizens, not military command structures. You heard the speech from Honorable Kawanda when NRM MPs, I'm trying to paraphrase one of his statements during that, what he said during the statement that de-endorsed Anita Among. When we receive a command from our chair, we listen and follow, no questions, right? Look at the judiciary. It is supposed to interpret laws independently. Parliament is supposed to legislate independently. And civilian authority is supposed to remain civilian, right? Once we see military influence beginning to shape the operational culture of civilian institutions, the Republic's laws, the Republic's law starts to shrink around personalized authority. And this is where Uganda must become very careful. Because corruption is not only stealing money. Corruption is also what happens when public institutions become personalized, when civilian institutions become subordinated, and when the line between the republic and family influence begins to disappear. That is institutional corruption. And now let us dig deeper. Many Ugandans remember the privatization era. I want you to look back during that period when public assets were sold cheaply and those who were politically connected accumulated enormous wealth. Of course, state enterprises were disappearing and military political actors became deeply influential economically. And when I say that, I'm referring to the general, the third general that I talked about last week. General Salim Saleh repeatedly emerged as one of the most influential images inside Uganda's informal political structure. He still is one of the most influential people in Uganda today. Now, set that aside, like forget about the legality. It's very important to think about legal, but for a moment, put aside the legality of that. And then think about the issue of concentration. Ask yourself who benefits repeatedly when there is state restructuring, who accumulates influence across military, economic, and political systems. Think about it simultaneously. And then ask yourself another question who becomes untouchable afterwards? Because once institutions stop distributing opportunity fairly, citizens begin feeling the republic itself has been captured. Many Ugandans don't know where. Many of us have been asking about a potential transition and how it's going to happen. Mu Luganda tulina olugero olugamba nti Abaluganda bwe balya ennyama abagenyi balya magumba, I think so, something like that. That when family members eat the meat, visitors are shown the bones, right? And many Ugandans seem to be increasingly feel exactly that way, that the state belongs first to insiders and only secondly to the citizens, right? And I want us to understand that is dangerous. Because once citizens stop believing institutions belong to them, patriotism itself weakens. And this is why lifestyle audits must matter profoundly. Why lifestyle audits? Because lifestyle audits tell us how public funds are managed, who manages them, but most importantly, how have our leaders become wealthy? Where did they get their wealth? How did they accumulate that wealth? It gives us that opportunity to judge people correctly, right? So years ago, when the Inspector General of Government proposed aggressive lifestyle audits for public officials, President Museveni cautioned against moving too aggressively about lifestyle audits. I think it was 2021. He explained that the corrupt officials might move stolen monies outside of Uganda if pressured too hard. Now, think about that logic. The conversation was no longer how do we stop theft? And it suddenly changed into what happens if thieves export that money. You understand? That statement unilaterally revealed Uganda's deeper anti-corruption problem. Corruption became manageable as long as it remained politically useful, economically domesticated, and structurally controlled. But this is not anti-corruption. That is corruption management. And Uganda cannot build strong institutions on managed corruption. Now, here is the paradox. I think President Museveni still has a historic opportunity. In this new term, if he's serious, I think he could either deepen institutional decline or redefine his legacy completely. So he has two choices, and he's going to have to choose. Do I redefine my legacy completely by making institutions strong? Or do I choose to deepen institutional decline? Those are two choices. I still think he has an opportunity to strengthen institutions. And I think the defining choice is not to engage in more speeches. It is not about the sovereignty rhetoric, and it's not about arresting individuals like Nandutu or Anita Among or Otayewa, who hasn't said anything so far. I think the defining question is, will Uganda finally institutionalize universal accountability? Will they, the current government, the new government, will it have the courage to establish real lifestyle audits that are completely independent and that are mandatory for transparency and not selective to certain individuals, but from all ministers, all army generals, all MPs, of course, judges, procurement officials, and of course, those who are politically connected to the first family. Because the greatest threat to Uganda today is not opposition politics. It is institutional decay caused by normalized impunity. And this is where Ugandans themselves must become wiser politically. Citizens must stop treating politics like football clubs. This is not about NRM versus opposition. It's not about government versus critics, or North versus South, or one tribe versus the other. This is about whether Uganda still believes public institutions should remain bigger than families, personalities, and military networks. And let me say this very clearly. The answer is not hatred toward the first family. No. There's no reason why you should hate them. But I think we can ask certain questions. We can ask them to be courageous enough to make Uganda a better republic. The answer is institutional discipline. Strong republics survive because institutions remain stronger than individuals. That means parliament must operate independently. Military officers must respect civilian institutional boundaries. If the CDF is not allowed to engage in politics. They shouldn't have what they call HC PLU, engaging in politics and defining decisions, making defining decisions, right? Also, corruption investigations must become universal, not just for the select few, and public offices must stop functioning as pathways to unexpected wealth. Uganda does not need less sovereignty. It needs sovereignty rooted in accountable institutions. And that begins with rejecting the Lilliputian politics, the small ethics, the small accountability, the small patriotism, the big personalities swallowing public institutions. That Lilliputian politics must be avoided because ultimately, Uganda's crisis is not merely corruption. It is the gradual privatization of the republic itself. And once citizens begin feeling that the republic belongs to networks rather than the nation, instability quietly begins growing underneath the surface. That is why this moment matters. Anita Among's withdrawal should not merely become spectacle. The Protection of Sovereignty Act should not merely become another instrument to centralize control. And the swearing in symbolism at Kololo should not simply become normalized. I think instead of Ugandans accepting those as norms, they should use this moment to demand something bigger, something better for the country. Ugandans should demand stronger institutions. They should demand universal accountability. That means everyone should have a lifestyle audit, even those who are quiet right now. I haven't heard anything from our deputy speaker. I don't want to start conversation about him, but just like his boss is going through these processes, he should too. The MPs should too, or the commissioners that facilitated the service awards, they should too. Even members of the first family. Because a republic where no family or no speaker or no general, or sometimes I engage in these conversations and I just feel defeated. And I don't want Ugandans to get to that stage. It's not a good place to be. I think there's still a very big opportunity for people to speak honestly about how the country should be governed without fear or favor. Because countries do not collapse only through war. Sometimes they collapse quietly when institutions become too small to contain power. And I feel like Uganda has become a Lilliput. But most importantly, Uganda still has time to choose differently. And I encourage all new legislators to think about this more critically. Always a pleasure to engage with you. My name is Henry Sully, and these are my thoughts, without fear or favor, for God and my country.
This is the state of the nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Sully.